Good evening. Over on the CDC's website, they recently made a quiet revision. That's because without much fanfare, they changed the very definition of the word vaccine. It now officially no longer means that you are immune from infection. Meanwhile, 3 days ago during an interview on CNN, Dr. Fauci made a very interesting statement. While he was on air, he was asked about a large study that was conducted over in Israel, which found that natural immunity to COVID after a person was previously infected was up to 13 times stronger than the immunity conferred through a vaccine. And so he was asked directly, why should a person who already had COVID get vaccinated? Let's go through his answer together and then dive into the study, look at how it was conducted, look at the methodology, and specifically, let's look at the results. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman, from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about the vaccine, specifically about the definition of what the vaccine actually means, which is not as clear as you might imagine, given the fact that the CDC has recently, and very quietly, changed what the word actually means. That's right. Over on one of their web pages where the term vaccine is defined, the CDC recently made some changes. And in order to clearly see what those changes actually are, let's put the old definition and the new definition side by side so we can compare them. So between 2015 and August 31st of 2021, a vaccine was defined as, quote, a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, protecting the person from that disease. And then on that very same page, when you scroll down a bit, it defined the term vaccination as, quote, the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. And that generally agrees with what most people think when they hear those two words, either the word vaccine or the word vaccinated. However, earlier in September, the CDC quietly changed the definition to read this. The word vaccine is now defined as, quote, a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases, while the word vaccination is defined as, quote, the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce protection from a specific disease. Now notice something. In this new definition, there is a key word that is omitted that was there previously, and that word is immunity. The word immunity no longer appears anywhere in the new definition of either the word vaccine or the word vaccinated, meaning that the new definition of being quote-unquote vaccinated means that you are no longer immune. And just for your reference, by the way, according to the CDC's website, here's what the word immunity actually means. Protection from an infectious disease. If you are immune to a disease, you can be exposed to it without becoming infected. And so, according to the previous definition, being vaccinated meant that you were immune, meaning that you can be exposed to the disease without being infected. However, the new definition of being vaccinated that was just introduced, that means that your body is now only protected from a specific disease. It's not immune. Now, there are several takes on this change. For instance, supporters of this revision say that it's natural to revise the definition of a term as the science progresses. In fact, we here at the Epoch Times, we reached out to the CDC for comment, and they got back to us telling us that this change made the whole thing more transparent. Here's specifically what they wrote to us in an email. The previous definition could be interpreted to mean that vaccines are 100% effective, which has never been the case for any vaccine. So the current definition is more transparent and also describes the ways in which vaccines can be administered. However, opponents of this revision are saying that these changes have nothing to do with the evolution of science, but rather that the CDC made this revision specifically because the COVID vaccines are becoming less effective in fighting against the Delta variant. For instance, Ms. Cheryl Atkinson, who is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, she said that this new definition was made to meet the declining ability of some of today's vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine. After the COVID-19 vaccines were introduced and it was discovered they do not necessarily prevent disease or provide immunity, the CDC altered the definition of vaccines again to say that they merely produce protection. Furthermore, it's also worth noting that the actual dictionary, specifically the Merriam-Webster dictionary, they likewise made the same alteration back in February. Prior to February, according to the dictionary, vaccines produced immunity. However, the word immunity is no longer found in the updated definition of the word, at least in the Merriam-Webster edition of the dictionary. Now, if you've been following these developments for a while now, you know that this change in what the word vaccine means is not an isolated incident. That's because, among several other instances of this type of thing happening, back in October of last year, the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, they quietly changed the definition of the term herd immunity. And so likewise, let's take a look at the old definition and the new definition side by side and see if we can notice the difference. Prior to October of 2020, here's how the WHO defined herd immunity. Herd immunity is the indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune through either vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. Okay, now notice how in this previous definition, the term herd immunity, it encompassed both the immunity that an individual might attain from a vaccine, but also the immunity that a person would receive from having a previous infection. However, things have changed. Here's the new definition of the term herd immunity, at least according to the WHO. Herd immunity, also known as population immunity, is a concept used for vaccination, in which a population can be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached. Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Do you see that very slight change there? Because prior to this change in definition, a person could make the argument that they don't need to be vaccinated because they have already previously been infected, they have the natural antibodies, and they are naturally contributing to the herd immunity. However, even though that concept, it might have not changed, it remains the same, the word's definition has changed. And so a person, they can no longer make the argument that a previous infection allows them to contribute to the herd immunity, because technically, that's not what herd immunity means anymore. That is quite an amazing way to win an argument. You just literally change the definition of the word. And so these two new definitions, both the CDC's change in what the word vaccination means, as well as the WHO's change in what the term herd immunity means, well, it is a perfect backdrop for us to discuss what Dr. Fauci just said on CNN regarding this study from Israel. However, before we delve into that, I would like to take a very quick second to introduce our sponsor for today's episode, and I will do so from the sound booth. That's right, Roman. Although today we're not in the sound booth, we're in a living room looking area. In fact, take a look at this. So this right here is what's known as a US dollar. And in my opinion, with the way that the government is acting right now, printing these things into oblivion, unfortunately, within probably one generation, this is just my opinion, I don't give any financial advice, but this likely will not be the world's reserve currency any longer. Which is why every single month what I do is I get one of these boxes delivered to me from American Hartford Gold. And American Hartford Gold is a phenomenal gold dealer. They don't only sponsor my channel, they're one of my favorite gold dealers to work with. And every single month, I buy gold and silver from them because I believe that it had value 5,000 years ago, it has value today, and it'll likely have value well into the future. And take a look at these beautiful pieces that they send me. You got these beautiful 1 ounce silver American Walking Liberties here. And then you have this beautiful 1 ounce Canadian maple. I don't know if you can see how shiny that is. It's beautiful. Yeah, and right, if you order from American Hartford Gold, they have a special going on for our watchers, for our viewers. If depending on how much you buy, they'll send you $1,500 worth of free silver, and on top of that, they'll send you a very special gift right here. I'll take a look and show you what it is. By the way, American Hartford Gold, they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They're super friendly and nice to work with. When you call them, not only are their staff friendly, but if they put you on hold, their hold music is a speech from Ronald Reagan, so I never even mind when I have to hold it a little bit. And yeah, they're just awesome. They can send you physical gold and silver to your doorstep, or they can deposit it directly into your IRA account, making the whole thing super simple. And not only will they send you free silver, they'll also send you this hat, which has written on it everything you need to survive a crisis: God, gold, and guns. So claim your $1,500 worth of free silver and your free hat. You can click on the link in the description box below, or give them a call at 866-242-2352, or text Roman to 65532. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, 3 days ago, Dr. Fauci appeared on a program over on CNN. And during that program, he was asked about this new study, which was published by Israeli researchers. And in this study, it found that a person who had a previous COVID infection, meaning that the person got COVID and then recovered from it, that conferred to him better protection against both future infection as well as hospitalization than does the vaccine. So again, just for clarification, what the study found is that it compared people who were previously infected versus those who were vaccinated, and that a previous infection, it gave much better protection than the vaccine. And so during that interview on CNN, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is a medical correspondent on CNN, he asked Dr. Fauci this question. I get calls all the time. People say, I've already had COVID, I'm protected. And now the study says maybe even more protected than the vaccine alone. Should they also get the vaccine? How do you make the case to them? To which Dr. Fauci responded by saying this. I don't have a really firm answer for you on that. Now, just to pause here for a moment, his response does continue, But that is really just amazing to hear, because with all of the vaccine mandates that are coming down across the country, there are no exemptions typically for those who have previously been infected. And so, for instance, here in New York City, you either show your vaccine card or they don't let you into a restaurant. You can't just tell the proprietor that you've previously been infected by COVID. That just doesn't work. Regardless, Dr. Fauci continued his response by saying this, quote, "That's something that we're going to have to discuss regarding the durability of the response. The one thing that paper from Israel didn't tell you is whether or not, as high as the protection is with natural infection, what's the durability compared to the durability of a vaccine. So it is conceivable that you got infected, you're protected, but you may not be protected for an indefinite period of time. So I think that is something that we need to sit down and discuss seriously, because you very appropriately pointed out it is an issue and there could be an argument for saying what you said." Now, there is a real irony to Dr. Fauci's answer, because just a few weeks ago, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who's the director of the CDC, she cited 3 new studies which were published in the CDC's weekly report. It's called the Morbidity and Mortality Report, which found that the vaccine's effectiveness has been decreasing over time in preventing both serious illness as well as death. Now, depending on which study you look at, which of those 3 studies, the efficacy of the vaccines has dropped to either 53%, 75%, or 79%. Regardless, though, they are all decreasing. All the metrics are saying that they're going down. And it was this fact, the fact that the vaccine's efficacy appears to be dropping over time, which led the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, as well as the Surgeon General to recommend booster shots, which are, of course, now being rolled out. And so for Dr. Fauci to say that natural immunity should be looked at with skepticism because it could decrease over time, I mean, technically that's a true statement. However, the caveat there is that the same appears to apply for the vaccines. Regardless, let's spend some time and actually delve into this Israeli study more deeply, because it is the largest real-world study that has been conducted thus far comparing natural immunity to protection conferred by the vaccines. And by the way, notice I say protection conferred by the vaccines because, as we mentioned earlier, the very definition of the word vaccine has changed such that it no longer makes the claim to offer immunity. Regardless, let's dive into this study together. And to start with, this is actually a preprint of the study. It was published online about 2.5 weeks ago, and it has yet to be peer-reviewed, so just keep that in mind. However, the way that this study was conducted, as well as the scale of the population it looked at, well, that is exactly what makes this the very first of its kind. And so what the Israeli scientists were looking at here with this study is they were comparing the reinfection rates for individuals who already had COVID compared to breakthrough cases in fully vaccinated subjects. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the data set in this study is very unique. That's because this data was collected during a period of time from June all the way up to August 14th of 2021. And the reason this is so important is that this data accounts for the Delta variant. This was collected during a period of time when the Delta variant was spreading, and this data set accounts for that, which is not the case for previous studies. And more specifically, this study looked at 673,000 fully vaccinated people. And what's key here is the point in time which these people were vaccinated and the point in time which the individuals who had a prior infection, they were the same. Because the criteria for being in the study, for being a part of the study, was that fully vaccinated people must have had their vaccine before the 28th of February. And then the people who had a prior infection, that infection had to also take place before February 28th. And so this fact is very key because this study makes it a really apples-to-apples comparison. And so let's go through this data together. This study compared 673,000 people who were fully vaccinated before February 28th of 2021, specifically with the Pfizer vaccine. It compared 662,000 people that had a prior COVID infection, again before February of 2021. And then they had a third group, which was 42,000 people who had a prior infection before February 28th, but they also received 1 dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And so what they did for these 3 different groups is that they collected their infection data between June and August 14th of 2021. And so during this follow-up period, among all the groups, they found 257 cases of COVID. And then when you break that down, they found that 238 of these cases occurred among the vaccinated group and only 19 occurred in the previously infected group. And so what that means is that there were 238 breakthrough cases and only 19 reinfections. And then after readjusting the data to account for comorbidities, the researchers said that they found a 13-fold increased risk for breakthrough cases as opposed to reinfection. In summarizing their findings, here's what the researchers said, quote, "This analysis demonstrated that natural immunity affords longer-lasting and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalization due to the Delta variant." All right, there were actually two things that I failed to mention during the in-studio filming of today's episode, and actually I made a small error. You probably caught it. When I was speaking, I said that in this study, there were 620,000 individuals who had a previous infection that were being studied. However, the actual number, as you saw in the graphic, was 62,000 people, not 620,000. I misspoke. However, that still does make this the largest study of its kind in the world, and the results are still statistically significant. Okay, so now the first thing I wanted to make mention was that this study was actually conducted on a rolling basis. So as we mentioned in the prior segment, the researchers found that people who were fully vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, they were 13 times more likely to contract the Delta variant, and they were 27 times more at risk of getting a symptomatic disease compared to individuals who had recovered from a previous infection. That's what we already mentioned in the episode. However, those figures, they apply only when you compare cases when the first vaccination and the infection occurred sometime between January and February of 2021. However, as I mentioned, this research was actually done on a rolling basis. So this is what it says, quote, when researchers compared cases of prior infection that occurred between March of 2020 and February of 2021 with vaccinations between January and February of 2021, they found that the vaccinated cohort was 5.96 times more likely to contract the Delta variant and 7.13 times more at risk for symptomatic disease compared to those who were previously infected, end quote. And so what that seems to suggest is that the natural immunity that you get from a prior infection, it seems to wane over time, which is actually similar to what Dr. Fauci said during that interview on CNN. However, and this is the interesting part, according to this study, even though your natural immunity seems to wane over time, at no point in the months that they studied was the immunity, well, rather the protection that you got from the vaccine greater than the natural immunity. So even though they both wane over time, it seems that the natural immunity that you get from a real prior infection seems to be greater than the vaccine at all the months that they studied. So that's kind of interesting that Dr. Fauci says that we need to study the natural immunity more, while at the same time it seems, at least from this study, that it's still better than the vaccine. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing that I failed to mention in the episode relates to that third group that we mentioned, the about 42,000 individuals who had a prior infection and then got one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And so the reason I really did not mention them in the in-studio filming of that episode was because this is a quote from the article, quote, the researchers found that the group with one vaccine dose was marginally or 0.53 times less likely to be reinfected with the Delta variant, end quote. And so basically, they found that it's a small chance, but really, according to the researchers, they did not demonstrate a significance, basically a statistically significant amount of change in that third group. So they said that more research needs to be done. However, there was not enough evidence to suggest anything one way or the other. However, I think what this Israel study really shows us, and again, take it for what it's worth, it has not yet been peer-reviewed. It is in the process of being peer-reviewed, so I'm looking forward to when it's published in that format. However, what it shows, in my opinion at least, is that prior immunity should not just be wholesale discounted like it seems to be right now in the general conversation, because, I mean, people are referring to it as being suboptimal or inefficient against, let's say, the Delta variant or any future variants. However, according to this study, that does not seem to be the case. So I hope, at the very least, this study opens up a new wave of communication or a new wave of discussion about prior immunization that you get from actually getting infected with the virus, because that's what a lot of people are talking about. As vaccine mandates are raining down across the country, people are saying, hey, I was already infected with COVID, why do I still need to be vaccinated? So we'll see how this all plays out. If you want to read this study for yourself, as I'll mention in the in-studio filming when we get back to that, you can find that and every other article that we discussed in the description box below. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, if you would like to read any of the articles that we discussed in today's episode, including this study from Israel right here, I'll throw all that into the description box below this video for you to be able to comb through for yourself. Otherwise, as I have mentioned in several previous episodes, coincidentally, on the very same day that Joe Biden was sworn into office, YouTube, for some odd reason, decided to demonetize our program. We can no longer run any ads before, during, or after our episodes, and the Super Chat feature has mysteriously been disabled. It seems like they are trying to demonetize our program and snuff out our independent journalism. However, we here at the Epoch Times, we did not take this lying down, and instead we created something very cool. It's called Epoch TV. It's our brand new no censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epoch Times video programs like The Larry Elder Show, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, American Thought Leaders, China in Focus, Life and Times, Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza Gill, as well as our show Facts Matter. And on there we publish exclusive content that you cannot find here on YouTube. And also, we publish awesome documentary series on there as well, such as our series called The Dark Origins of Communism, which explores the theoretical underpinnings of this ideology, which has seeped into every facet of a society, not only here in America, but across the entire world. If you want to check out all the awesome content over on Epoch TV, I'll throw a link to it right there at the top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. Now, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, smash that notification bell as well so you can be actually notified of any new videos as we release them. And then lastly, if you have an Instagram account, consider following me at Epoch Times Roman. I publish behind-the-scenes research as well as spicy memes. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.